My name is Adriana. I'm 45, I'm a dentist, and I have my own successful practice downtown. I am proud of what I have achieved: years of study, internships, then hard work, and now, finally, I am my mistress. But 10 years ago, my life changed in ways I couldn't even imagine. I married David. He was caring, attentive, a real mainstay. But with him came into my life, and his 12-year-old daughter, Fina. A girl with light eyes and a prickly character. He didn't need me here. From the first day he clarified it. "Dad," he said, without even looking in my direction, "can you tell your wife that I'm not hungry?" Your wife. 2 short words in which he hid all his dislike. Each of them looked like a punch in the face. The first months after the wedding turned into a real struggle. Fina slammed the doors, refused to talk to me, made tantrums that shook the walls, and the neighbors shook their heads sympathetically. It was like he was testing me, checking when I would break up, when I would give in to emotions, when I would start screaming. But I did not intend to abide by these rules. I was not angry, threatened, not punished. I was just waiting. One evening, after a particularly tumultuous scene, I went to his door. Knock. "Fina," I said quietly, "I'm not here to replace your mother. I just hope we can find our way to get along." Outside the door was quiet. He didn't answer. But since that evening something has changed. I stopped treating her like a child to control. I responded calmly, even when I heard stinging comments. If he wanted to talk to his father and not to me, I did not care. David was worried, trying to reconcile us, but I knew that trust is not built through strength. And then one day at breakfast, after months of tacit confrontation, he said, "Dad, and Adriana's pancakes smell good." It was the first, albeit indirect, recognition of my worth in his world. Years passed. The change happened slowly, almost imperceptibly. We began to spend time together, watching movies, going on vacation. He began to talk to me directly, first briefly, on the case, and then only so. "Adriana," he once asked, calling me for the first time without a hint of annoyance, "can I come with you and Dad to a beach house this summer?" I smiled. When her mother, Paula, remarried, much changed. She no longer pushed her daughter to hostility. She did not turn against me. Their phone conversations became shorter, quieter. "Mom is different now," Fina admitted one night while we were making dinner. "Seem happier." "Everyone deserves a second chance at happiness," I replied, watching her stir the sauce. Then I realized, let's become a family. When Fina went to college, I did not hesitate to offer help with payment. For me it was natural, it was part of our life. David and I discussed it beforehand and he agreed. The night before his departure, we sat on his bed between semi-packaged boxes. I felt like I had to say something important. "My brother, David, runs a marketing company in the city center. When you graduate, if you are interested, I will help you find a job there. It's a great place to start your career." He remained silent for a long time, looking out the window. And then he nodded. I felt something warm coming out inside. We have come a long way, from cold estrangement to this point. And that there were new challenges ahead of us, I knew that now we will make it together. He hugged me. Not one of those awkward, unobtrusive side hugs we shared before, but firmly, sincerely, as if he really recognizes me as part of his family for the first time in my life. "Really?" he whispered, without loosening his grip. "That would be great, Adriana." "Thank you." Subsequently, our meetings became less frequent. Student life turned Fina into a whirlpool of studies, friends, internships. He came home for the holidays, sometimes for weekends, but it was fine. I did not expect another. Youth requires freedom. Each arrival was a small holiday for me. I cooked everything she loved: lasagna, which she once admitted to being better than her mother's, the same chocolate chip cookies she secretly took from the kitchen, thinking I didn't notice. "How's your business management program?" I asked for dinner while we were sitting at the table with the whole family. She lit up as she talked about her courses, Professor Turner being an example to her, internships and big plans for the future. Sometimes, in the middle of a conversation, he mentioned his mother. "I went to my mother last weekend," he threw between cases, and then immediately translated the topic. "Oh, but you'd see a project I'm doing for a marketing course." I never insisted when he so skillfully changed the direction of the conversation. His bond with his mother was natural and David didn't care either. We found a comfortable rhythm. During these visits, he told us about his friends, about his part-time work in a university cafe, about how he masters adulthood. And I just listened, serving her favorite dishes, while laughter and a cozy, almost homely atmosphere reigned at the table. And then one day, during the same dinner, he suddenly said, "You know, my roommate can't believe how lucky my stepmother is. He complains about yours forever." He said it simply, without extra pathos. But to me, those words meant more than he could have imagined. After all the years of struggle, hearing her talk about me so easily, so daily, as something obvious, was like winning an Olympic medal. David silently shook my hand under the table. I knew he was thinking the same thing. One evening, while we were cleaning after dinner, Fina stayed in the kitchen longer than usual. She turned a towel in her hands, as if deciding to say something important. "Adriana," he said at the end, looking up at me. "Thanks for everything. Not just for college. For everything." Time creeps unnoticed. It seems that yesterday I helped her to fix things in the dormitory, and now she was already standing in a cloak and a square academic cap, getting a diploma. I saw her walking on stage, and at that moment I thought only of one thing: the keys in my bag. The apartment that once belonged to my grandmother was small but cozy, 2 rooms, bright walls, windows overlooking the park. I rented it for years, but now I had other plans. After the ceremony, sitting in the back seat of the car, Fina chatted animatedly about the release. "Sarah moves to Chicago, Mike has a job in Boston. It's strange how everyone moves around the country." I caught David's eye and smiled. He did not yet know that he should not go anywhere. When we got home and finally settled into the living room, I kept the excitement at bay. "Fina," I said, "I have something for you." My hands shook slightly as I pulled a small keychain out of my bag. On the silver keychain shone engraved initials, his initials. Fina took the keys, clutching them in the palm of her hand, and frowned. "What is it?" he asked, throwing a puzzled look at me. "Apartment," I replied simply. "My grandmother's old house. Now it's yours." There was silence in the room. Fina looked at the keys, then me, then the keys again. David's mouth opened in surprise. "Are you serious?" he whispered, as if afraid to believe in the reality of what was happening. I smiled. "Totally serious," I said softly. "Now that you start your career, you will need your own housing. Maybe one day even a family." I took out the phone and opened the photos. "It's all set up so you can move whenever you want." Fina's eyes filled with tears. She approached me at lightning speed and hugged me, not unobtrusively, not embarrassingly, but strongly, as if as a child. "Adriana. I can't believe it. Thank you." David was next. He hugged me, his lips touched my ear. "I love you," he whispered. "You look amazing." Fina had already grabbed her coat, her face shone with excitement. "Can I go see her now?" I nodded, naming the address again to make sure he remembered. "Naturally." The keys approached the entrance to the building and the door to the apartment. "Take your time, look around. I think I'll be there tonight." His voice sounded with joy. Is that normal? I want to feel my new home. David and I looked at her. When the door closed behind her, the house was filled with a strange and unusual silence. We sat on the couch, huddled together. Think about it, I said, resting my head on his shoulder. One day she will meet someone special and this apartment will be their first home together. David smiled, kissing me on the top of my head. And then we will become grandparents, and you will pamper our grandchildren in the same way as you will pamper our daughter. Our daughter, these words echoed in me, filling every cell with warmth. After all the years of fights, tears, mistrust, Fina really became my daughter. I was enjoying a quiet and measured morning when the front door suddenly opened with a rumble. I shuddered. On the threshold, like a raging hurricane, was Paula. "How dare you?" he shouted, his face distorted with anger. "Who do you think you are?" I got up from the couch. My heart was pounding. "Paula. What happened? Don't play with me in innocence." He was running around the living room like a beast in a cage. "Fina told me about your generous gift. The whole apartment, everything." His voice was full of sarcasm. He practically spat out the words. "You think you can buy my daughter's love?" The accusation was like a slap in the face. I stood still. "That's not the case at all," I tried to explain, swallowing a lump in my throat. "Oh, sure." He interrupted, his eyes flashed. "You inherited this apartment, and you just so convenient began to give it to Fina, knowing full well that I will never be able to match such an expensive gift." I raised my hands in a gesture of reconciliation. "Paula, listen. I love Fina. She's like a daughter to me. I just wanted to help her start adulthood." Paula laughed sharply, bitterly, as if my answer only added fuel to the fire. "You've been trying to replace me since day one." His voice trembled with anger. First the luxury holidays, then the payment of his college, and now that. He approached me, raised his hand, and instinctively backed away. At that moment, David appeared in the room. He silently grabbed her wrist. "Enough," his voice was steel, hard as stone. "You need to leave now." Paula pulled out her hand, her eyes through lightning. "It's not over." Paula's voice trembled with anger. "Adriana, do you think you're so generous, so perfect? Well, you can't buy maternal love. Fina will always be my daughter, not yours, no matter how many apartments you throw at her." The door slammed behind her with such force that the glass shook in the windows. I froze on the spot. My whole body trembled as if from the cold, but a fire raged inside. David approached cautiously and tried to hold me in his arms, but I could not relax. My thoughts swirled frantically, scrolling through Paula's words again and again. Have I really tried to buy Fina's love all these years? Did it look like this from the outside? Maybe it wasn't just Paula who thought so. "He's wrong," David said softly, but there was a slight uncertainty in his voice. "You know he's wrong, right?" I nodded mechanically, but somewhere inside I felt my world begin to crumble. 10 years. 10 years, step by step, carefully building trust. 10 years of rare victories and painful retreats. And now, in an instant, everything is reduced to accusations of corruption and manipulation. Fina showed up the next morning. Her eyes were reddened, her face pale, as if she had stayed up all night. He slowly flowed into the kitchen, where I made coffee, but almost did not look at me. "Fina," I began cautiously. "About yesterday." "I don't want to talk about it." He cut me quickly, with a flat, colorless voice. Without further ado, he turned and went to his old room, silently closing the door behind him. I stood in the kitchen, clutching a coffee pot in my hand, and the click of the door surrendered deaf in my head. That sound seemed definitive. It's like a judge's hammer proclaiming a verdict. All day, I heard his fingers pounding on the phone screen, probably sending messages. To whom? I could only guess. Maybe Mother's. When Fina finally showed up for dinner, a tense silence hung over the table. He lazily moved the food on the plate, almost without touching it, and never let the phone out of his hand. And then, suddenly, he announced, "I'm planning a ball at Lumi next weekend." I felt relieved. Finally an opportunity to overcome that tension. It's wonderful. I can help you plan everything. He shook his head. Happen. But Lumi is an expensive restaurant. We can afford it, he abruptly interrupted. My real mother pays for it. How clearly he uttered these two words, true mother. Not just mom. Not just mother. A real mother. It is as if we are deliberately drawing a line between us. Later that night, I told David about our conversation. He said, "Real mother." I said, as if tasting those words. It looked like a knife in the back. It was like he wanted to hurt me. "You see too much in this," he answered absent-mindedly, stroking my hand. "She's just tense about this whole situation. You know how Paula can be." I nodded, but the doubts did not leave me. Over the next few days, I came home from work and heard Fina's voice ringing in the hallway. He called friends, relatives, discussing the party. "It'll be great." His voice sounded enthusiastic. She cheerfully told how her mother rented the entire restaurant. Yes, French chic, downtown. I was standing in the hallway, clutching the keys to my apartment and listening. Fina called cousins, college friends, even some of our neighbors. Day after day, the guest list grew, and invitations continued to fly. But the invitation never came to me. Every time I heard her talking on the phone, adding more and more names, I felt like there was an invisible wall being built between us. Brick by brick. I did not notice it until the wall became almost insurmountable. One night I overheard her talking on the phone. Her voice was subdued but full of joyful excitement. "It's okay. Menu, decorations, guest list." He laughed at something the other person had said. And at that moment I realized, I am not part of this event. I wasn't part of his party. I wasn't part of his life. I turned around and slowly went to my room. Clenching into fists the keys that were once a symbol of a new beginning, but now looked like just a piece of cold metal. And that sound pierced my chest like a knife. It was the same laugh he shared with me when we watched movies late, when we cooked together, when we sat in the kitchen on rainy evenings, drank tea, and talked about the whole world. And now that laugh sounded different, detached, mocking, cold. For 2 days I lived like on needles. Each new guest at her prom was another nail in the lid of my casket. And finally, I could not stand it anymore. The next morning I found her in the kitchen. She was sitting at a table, staring at the phone screen, lazily stirring a spoonful of coffee. Her face was completely impassive, as if nothing had happened. It was as if he hadn't invited everyone but me. "Fina," my voice trembled more than I expected. "Can we talk?" He did not look up. "About what?" "About the party. I haven't heard the details yet. What time my father and I—" "You're not coming." I blinked, not immediately realizing the meaning of what was said. "What?" Eventually Fina broke away from the phone and looked straight at me. "You're not invited." I grabbed the edge of the table so as not to falter. "So far." "What gives? Is it because of your mother? Because of what happened the other day?" To my real mother, he highlighted the words with predatory clarity, as if sinking them into my heart. "Yeah. He doesn't want you there." "Me too." I felt the air coming out of my chest. "I don't understand." I pulled back the chair and sat down, feeling a strange weakness in my legs. if it's because of the apartment. She laughed. Sharply. And hard. It was not his previous laugh, but rather different. Oh, I'll keep the apartment, he said with a toxic smile. Who will refuse free housing? I grabbed my fingers on the edge of the table. So far. Weighted pay for all the years I've had to endure you and your perfect stepmother. The world before me was pumped. Endure? I just recognized my voice. Oh, God, he rolled his eyes, pushing the chair away so sharply that his legs slid squeakily onto the tile. You really don't understand, do you? So far, have you suffered all this time? He crossed his arms on his chest, raising his chin. I never loved you. You were just the woman who destroyed my family. If you hadn't introduced yourself, my parents could have made things right. We could be a real family again. Like a slap in the face. I closed my eyes. Memories flashed frantically in my head, sleepless nights while I helped her with homework. All those moments when I held her in my arms while crying for the boys. The holidays we spent together. Everything I kept as precious memories suddenly became something completely foreign. My voice broke. Who do you think we've been for the last 10 years? She curled her lips into a wry half-smile. You want me to tell you we were family? No. Holidays we spent together. College. Oh, throwing money away is your solution to all problems, isn't it? She smiled badly. Amazing trips. Expensive gifts. Pay for college. And now the apartments. You thought you could buy yourself a daughter? That's not what I was trying to do. Tears came to my eyes, but I swept them away, trying with the last strength to keep calm. I did all this because. Why? Her eyes were shining. Because I love you. I blurted out. Fina laughed. Quiet, penetrating. Family, he repeated, as if he had tasted the word. My mother is my family. Dad is my family. And you. He stepped back. You're just a woman who came to ruin everything. Now you are trying to buy my love for an apartment. The air became dense, as if impregnated with smoke. I felt something shrink inside me, something important, something that kept me afloat all these years. The party is Sunday, at 7, he dropped last. He did not look at me, did not wait for an answer. He turned and left. And when the door slammed behind her, the photos on the walls shook. I raised my head mechanically. Our photos. High school graduation. That summer day at the beach. The moments I held as proof that we were a real family. Now they looked like an artificial scenario. Sophisticated lies. I looked at my cup. The coffee had cooled down a long time ago, but I could not pour it. It was like pouring out the last 10 years of your life. That night I was waiting for David to come home. My hands trembled as I ran over and over in my head as I told him about Fina's cruel words. How I will explain what happened, how I will see and understand it. When the door finally opened and he entered the house, I could no longer hold back. The story broke out of me in a fit torn, full of tears and pain that I so diligently repressed all day. I couldn't control my sobs, I couldn't stop the words flowing. David listened to me in silence, his face remained tense, motionless. And then, without saying a word, he turned and headed straight for Fina's room. He didn't even take off his coat. I sat in the kitchen, hands around a cooled cup of coffee. I'd been waiting. The minutes stretched like clockwork. When he finally showed up at the door, I looked up at him, hoping, eagerly hoping, for support, for understanding. About something that could make this nightmare less unbearable. But he wasn't looking at me. And my heart clenched before he even uttered the words that finally broke me. Fina has some valid arguments. Maybe Maybe it would have been better if I hadn't come to the party. The world has stopped. 10 years of marriage crystallized at this point with terrifying clarity. Are you still going? My voice sounded foreign, as if it belonged to someone else. David shrugged. Sure, Adriana. She's my daughter. He said it so simply. Like it's the most obvious thing in the world. Like I'm stupid to ask. Nod. I no longer trusted myself to speak. In the following days, I played the role of a perfect and understanding wife. I was smiling at breakfast. I was making their favorite dinners. I pretended everything was fine. And inside, my heart was breaking. On Sunday, I stood at the window and watched them leave. Fine, radiant, excited. David, reserved but satisfied. When the car hit around the corner, I did not lose a second. The blacksmith was already waiting in my grandmother's apartment. It worked quickly and quietly. 20 minutes later, I had new keys in my hand. At home, I moved like in a dream. David's suitcases were arranged in categories, sorted by season, neatly stacked. Like I always did before trips. Only this time he left forever. I put them at the door, preparing to banish him from his life as easily as he banished me from his. Then I brewed chamomile tea, my favorite drink since childhood. A familiar scent filled the kitchen. I sat on the couch, picked up the phone and opened Instagram. Fina has already posted the photos. In the picture, she was sandwiched between David and Paula. All three smiled at the camera. Like I never had a place there. As if they don't care. The caption of the photo was short. So blessed to celebrate with the people who really matter. People who really matter. I slowly lowered the phone. Midnight. I heard David's key spinning in the lock. His steps in the hallway. Then the silence. He saw the suitcases. Adriana. His voice was tense, confusion sounded in every syllable. What does all this mean? I had another sip of tea now cooled. It means you need to find another place to stay. Laugh. He actually laughed. Like it's a joke. You don't think that, are you bending over? It was just a party. I carefully put the cup on the table. Porcelain rattled silently against the tree. Just a party. I repeated slowly. Yes, he shrugged. Fina is angry now, but she will calm down. You shouldn't make this a drama. I looked at him. My husband and stepdaughter excluded me from the family party. My voice was flat, too flat. You sided with him when he said he never loved me. You saw her treat me like trash. And you didn't do anything. He opened his mouth, but I did not allow him to enter a word. Wait for divorce papers this week. Laughter stuck in his throat. Wait a minute, he approached me. We can fix it. I shook my head. Solve what? Fix that you never loved me? That I was just a convenient mother's substitute for your daughter? He stopped. Before David could answer, the front door opened loudly. Fina burst in, still in her evening dress. Mascara ran down her face in black traces, her hair disheveled, her breathing confused, a mixture of anger, fear, and panic. What did you do? He shouted, looking straight at me. Why can't I enter my apartment? I took another sip of chamomile tea. My hand was no longer shaking. Your apartment? Oh, you mean my grandma's apartment? Fina turned pale. You gave it to me. You can't take it back like this. In fact, I can. I put the cup on the table. Since you think it was just a bribe to buy your love, I'm taking it back. I'm not bribing people. Fina stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. You can't do that. I can. I looked her in the eye. And I did. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something, but I didn't give her time. And while we do, I continued, I called my brother this morning. Do not worry about the position in his company. I told him you're no longer part of the family. Fina's face was distorted. B, it's so cruel. Titan. How can you do this to me? I got up slowly. Cruel? I asked again, looking her straight in the eye. He stepped back. Is it cruel to pretend to love someone for 10 years? Cruelly accept everything I have given you, secretly despising me? Is it cruel to exclude me from prom and post photos with your real family? Fina opened her mouth, but there were no words. And then David finally found his voice. Adriana, you're being unreasonable. I slowly turned to him. No, I said quietly. For the first time in 10 years I'm clear. I took a deep breath and looked at them both. It's my apartment. You're not my family anymore. I want them both to leave immediately. Fina sobbed, turned and fled to her room. I heard the drawers of the dresser slamming, how the hooks fall into the suitcase with a clink, how through crying and cursing, she convulsed to pack her bags. David tried to talk to me all this time, but I went to the sink and turned on the water. The stream choked her voice. 30 minutes later, Fina appeared in the hallway, lugging her suitcases. His face burned with anger. You're a terrible person. He spat. You're worse than I ever thought. I hate you. I just said calmly. Goodbye, Fina. Then he turned to David. Don't forget your golf clubs. I'm in the garage. They're gone. The door closed behind them with one last click. I was in my quiet apartment. And he seems to have breathed deeply for the first time in a few days. The next morning, my phone exploded from messages. Paula called 17 times before moving on to text messages. Each new one was nastier than the previous one. How dare you take an apartment? You're a manipulator. You're a witch. I'll sue you. David's messages were different. Pray, apologize. Please talk to me. We can fix it. I'm sorry. For everything. Fina tried both approaches. First, I didn't mean what I said. Then, you're ruining my life. Finally. Please, Adriana. Sorry. I blocked them all. Without answering any messages. 10 years of manipulation. 10 years of lies. And finally everything became apparent. They used me. For my money. For my apartment. For my connections. But now, nothing else. The divorce was quick thanks to a prenuptial agreement. David tried to claim half of my property by reasoning about his contribution to the marriage. His lawyer stretched when mine showed a document signed 10 years ago. After that, David said nothing. Through common acquaintances, I heard that they found a small one-bedroom apartment on the other side of the city. Fina had a hard time finding a job without my connections. David had to sell the golf club membership to pay bail. It's my apartment. Now it looked bigger. Empty. But every morning it was mine. I brewed chamomile. Sitting by the window. And he watched the sun rise. It is no longer necessary to prepare complex meals for ungrateful people. You will no longer have to pay for other people's dreams. You don't have to pretend anymore. What do you think of this story? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.